So you'll see it happen right out in the open, right in your face. I think a lot of what I discuss is so on the fringe. Make sure my zipper's up. So I've done this process on a superficial level, which the way that I communicate here, I'm trying to get you to see that it's all one system, and I understand the system. And it's beyond comprehension. When I say understand, it really is an aphorism. It's why epitaphs and aphorisms aren't just like, that was Nietzsche's way of precluding nuance. So when you listen to Cliff High, you'll see that nuance is everything, because the nuance of purity can't be understood by those who are going after perfection. The perfection, the boisterousness, the voluptuousness, right? That is not good. So it gets into the Pythagorean idea. It gets into the John D hieroglyphic monad of sacred geometry, where you're looking at the monad, the sphere, as a representation and saying pi, right? 3.14 dot, 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 dot. Mathematician nerds, you can act like, there's an exact number, but there's an undulating field here. And it works on morphic resonance. And the problem with pi is that it's an irrational number. It doesn't actually exist. It is, in fact, a corkscrew, right? Then this led people into the direction of, well, we're traveling. And it's like, do you understand that you can travel without traveling? Like, you're spiritually traveling through a space into hell because you're traveling away from purification. And this completely baffles people. This gets them to a place where it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make rational sense dimensionally. If you have someone who is, you could say, photonically tethered to this, what do you think the significance of what is postulated as Jesus? And then we realize, if you follow Ralph Ellis and so forth, you're just talking about a family line. And even more, you go to the Zoroaster, like that I was discussing prior, Zarathustra, the importance of that. You look at the importance of what Jason Rizzo-Giorgiani talks about, Michael Tessarian, you start to see that they understand this, they see it, but they can't pinpoint it because everything is left so abstracted. And even in their own lives, they see the requirement, the need, the reverence toward purity, but they can't identify it. Whereas people such as myself, which really the way that I think would be considered autistic, I'm forced into thinking in a world that is completely rational, where I've always known that there's no rational aspect to it. There's no ontology. The ontology doesn't exist. The anthropology doesn't exist. Don't you see that? They're presuppositions, and they're never to be completed. This is what the Freemasons' 33rd degree conical opening of what's missing, right? It's what's missing. That sliver is missing. And even that is on an undulating field. So when you begin to posit that what is considered, when you look at a magnetic north, when you look at the north and south poles, when you look at this wobble, it's on this undulating field, but when you tilt everything over to its, right, when you rotate it, are you rotating it all the way to the left or the right? These things are extremely significant because this is how you view the world, but more so what you're unlocking mimetically through the codified system of events within your own genetics and your DNA. By the way, did you see what I posted up the other day, which might have just slipped past you? Is this particular channel, I don't even know what it was, but it was an article, and I'll be looking it up later. I'll post something up on this, but that vitamin D has actually been shown in this huge studies of what this person was saying, of over like 25,000 people, that vitamin D over a 4-year period would increase, or not increase, it would increase telomere length. So it would basically not necessarily create what would be considered anti-aging, right? So when I think about it, I'm going, wait, vitamin D, what do you think you're getting from what I tell you when I say adamantly, and you think I'm nuts probably, talking about beef liver to no end, talking about sardines to no end, talking about eggs to no end, that you're getting your vitamin D in? Even more so, I did supplement with vitamin D when I could, when it was available. I don't know if I threw some away. There was like some vitamin D that sort of just disappeared that I had as a backup or a reserve. I don't think I would take it now, but it's I might check in some pockets and see if I have that around. But I think I wrapped it in tin foil, and I was like, I'm not going to play with this, right? And there's so much disinformation. Like, I remember talking to somebody, giving them a ride, having this really awesome scientific, candid conversation with this guy who's involved with the Alzheimer's clinic in Palo Alto. And I remember picking him up. I remember being drawn to that area. You know, long after, there's no way with my fat ass at the time or even now, right? But looks can be deceiving. And that's why when I'm really making a play, not a play like a game or whatever, but when I'm really active and I'm really doing it, I'm training. I'm training and I'm putting it out there. There's no more of this fucking game where I'm sacrificing myself or anyone else or playing this fucking game or supplicating and trying to save people, right? And so this is where the phenomenon of the mind affects the outside world. And when you realize that the idea of perfection is a complete and total farce, and it's leading you off a cliff, just like the depiction of the demons going into the swine or the pigs and running off a cliff. That is essentially what we are, right? We become the profane. We become the goy. They can eat us. Long pig is what they call us. Or that's what it's referred to as by cannibalistic tribes, right? And the fact that this is happening around the world all the time and it's never ceased. And that we have probably eaten human flesh more than once in our lives. Do you think that they're going to admit to this? If somebody like JJ from Operation GCD, which is like OCD, because it's like you have to obsessively and compulsively peel this together if you're going to make any conjectures, and your area of study becomes so pinpointed, right, that you have to have some sort of point of origin, because this disease spreads itself out everywhere. Well, I knew this. I took this whole thing to a whole nother level where I used the phenomenology of the mind, wasn't just interacting and testing with it, but took it on to where I felt that darkness. I was in that darkness. I challenged it. I didn't challenge it. I went into war with it. And all these things that seem like abstract notions that really, in this etheric way, this wishy-washy sort of way, begin to take on the guise of certain religions, both affirming and showing the transient aspect and how these things either are supported and going on to today. That in the pure state of themselves, you could only get the mimetic sequence. That's why I talk about mimetics so often. Because what I'm inferring, what I'm saying when I'm talking about the mimetic codes and the mimetic sequences, you have the first strand of a certain number of amino acids, like microfractions, 181 amino acids, right? When you're talking about insulin growth factors, mechanofactors, ghrelin, secreting, when you're talking about GHRPs and so forth, and the localized effect to heal back an area, and how they attached an LR3 or a long chain to this so that it would become systemic, so that something good for you, just like insulin, right, could be used in such a way where if people understood the anabolic aspect of insulin, steroids never would have been used. If you naturally heighten the secretion of the testosterone, and you're understanding how to spike insulin and take insulin in, you could effectively, this gets into Dan Duquesne's death wish diet, right? This is not really difficult stuff when you look at insulin and glucagon, and you look at how it is the mediating agent that causes growth, and how the pharmaceutical industry coming out with mid-acting and long-acting insulin knew what they were doing. These scientists knew what they were doing. They just turn a blind eye, right? Because what you have is you have this moment that may have taken place in the 1930s, but there's these epicenters, right, that have occurred where whatever was happening, this gets into a lot of Joseph Farrell's work, right? Whatever was happening with the Die Glocke, the Nazi bell, right? The instrumentation and the experiments, like even Kozarev's mirror, right? Being able to, like what he stated, is that you could go 5 seconds into the future, but do you understand from a scientific perspective that if you say 5 seconds or 3 seconds into the future, what he's saying on a scientific scale is that they are different timelines. People, they don't get that. They're thinking in terms of the same timeline. When you break 3 seconds or 5 seconds away, you're now on a different timeline. So what he was saying, what he was conveying is this warping shows the mirror refractions of a shared timeline where, in other words, when you look at the double slit experiment and you look at rate coding and propagation and probabilities, right? Uncertainty principle. When you begin to look at this type of stuff, you see that there never was the choice to go in a specific direction, that because you're traveling at a certain rate or a certain speed, and when we talk about this, it's like, well, you're not really traveling through space, are you? Like, this is the whole thing, is that when you get into the thermodynamic aspect of it, where you have perfection, the idea of perfection, or absolute zero, the perfect crystalline structure that exists at a theoretical absolute zero, over here to the left, right? This is the left-hand path. It's not removed from the idea or the ideation. It's a very cold place, right? That's why the reptilians are associated with this. That's why everybody that's in this camp is easily identifiable. They are all cold, lizard-looking people. If you don't want to use that term, just see what manifestation physically would be able to survive in a cold regions of space, where they would be thermically in balance at the same time and be able to withstand it. Colder and ever colder regions. Well, where you have purity, which the trial by fire, the purification, absolute hot, existent, it's not talked about very often, is it? They like to refer to this as entropy. Isn't that interesting that entropy and chaos are referred to synonymously, yet it's the purification that melts away and destroys the idea of perfection. And then all you see before that purification sweeps over you is monad. But, like, how would you describe it? You're going to show this depiction of a zero or an O. But it's like, really what was happening is you just saw the light, and that was your interpretation with your limited ocular center with those aromatic amino acids. You didn't understand that was the heat, that was the light. That is the sun scorching you and coming on you. So why do you think they have this false sun? Gets into Crow 777, right? The stuff that he's talking about. But he's put in a pivotal place. He's reporting a lot of mistruths. Because you can't just dabble on this and say, I'm going to make a living off of it, but I'm not going to go too deep. I'm going to dabble into this, but I'm still going to be a left-hand path practitioner and try to sweep up all that I can, where I'm looking at the tarot. Like, this is where Michael Tsarian went in the wrong direction, and I'm pleased to say that he went through the whole process, and he was sounding like a big supporter of witchcraft, witches, and it cost him his youth, his health. There was something going on that he doesn't talk about. He doesn't talk about it, but I can see the mark. I know when certain things have been done to people, and where this left-hand path practitionership eats you up, because it will blame the purity every time. It'll say, well, entropy shouldn't even really exist. Right? We take the bit of light, like this Shine On You Crazy Diamond, Pink Floyd, right? We take just the right amount of light, we trap it inside of this perfect crystalline structure. Time is in equilibrium, balance is in equilibrium. Therefore, the lizard king, the lizard way, is the way. Right? It's enough. But the problem is that there's no purity in it. So somewhere, this pure sun had to be sacrificed and trapped within the geometrical constants or structure of the nine. You following this? What do you think the ninth circle is, or the ninth gate? If you're not listening to this, then you're missing out on something where I put this together many years ago. And the way that you meditate on this is a sequence that is, I had over 30,000 views on Esoteric Principles of Light. You have the pure center down to the lower right. You have sacrifice up here, red, blue. You have expression, purple. Right? You see how it's moving? Purple, which is wisdom, which is pure wisdom, right? Down here to the lower left, right? You have green, which is community, but that is like a subjective thing. That is where people fail every single time, is on that fourth principle, but really the fifth if you come from purification. Then it comes down here, and this is pure, this is production, right? This is orange, this is production. Then, just like the phi or the phi symbol shoots up to ego, which is this yellow or this gold, right? And then it loops back, bifurcates, it loops back in, right? And it comes back into the pure center, right? Which is, you have these 13 steps, right? Where you have the phi or the phi swirl, right? And then this projects out around it and creates this emanation of the self here, and then this self inside, this self-sustaining energy. This is how it's shaped. This is reality. I'm not making this stuff up. This is why the tree of life works. This is why those evil little Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, really it's the Khazarian mob or mafia, they took that perfect Metatron's cube representation and the amplification, the resonance of that, and they added 4 particulates down on the bottom. A fork. They forked off reality. They forked or fucked. They fucked reality. They fucked reality. For the rest of us. They fucked it for themselves, but what they were is they were so they were kissing cousins. This is why on the Talmud that it's okay for them to have anal sex together. Homosexuality is if you look through it, it's fine. You could have anal sex, you could do this, that. This is why they're all fucked up. Because they're channeling this thelemic, or thelema, this thelemic energy of sex magic with a K, the Crowley magic. He was see, these are all Zionists. Trump's a Zionist, whether they know it or not. They believe in the superiority and the fact that they are proclaimed to live in a society, and they don't necessarily see eye to eye with other people in these factions as long as they go along. So they can do mass sacrifices of people in wars that shouldn't be taking place. They can make sacrifices by bending financial systems and people die away. They take away benefits. They never have to look at this. This is what the 1001 Club. I'm not talking out of my ass. Listen to me and look into them. I'm telling you information that you cannot find now. This was part of Julian Assange's discoveries. And they rename, so they take these names and they reassert the meanings of these names. And around that time, you saw Jean-Felix Picard. People were looking into it. He said he could take people to Mars for $250,000, which today would be in the millions, right? But it's like saying, yeah, for a measly $5 to $25 million, probably it's more like $25 million. For $25 million, if you can afford it, if you got the money, I can get you to Mars. What they used high altitude weather ballooning, where they could take you right up into the crest of space. And then they used certain technologies where they didn't need anything but the understanding of what we would consider solar sails and so forth. There wasn't a lot of rocket brute force gritology, like Cliff High likes to refer to things, required. Once you're up in space, all you have to do is set the trajectory. And they probably understood things that Nikola Tesla was playing with that may or may not have linked up with the Philadelphia experiment. It's very hard to say. So there was a lot of misinformation campaigns and outright lies about all these Project Blue Book and Bluebird and all these other fucking projects. I mean, Montauk Island. So you see this with Jake Barber, Lou Elizondo, Tom DeLonge. They're all idiots that are just working the gate. They're working the gate. They don't even know what they're doing. They can't see the whole picture. All they see, they're asked a certain question like, you seem like a real patriotic sort of guy. Let me ask you something. And they act, let me ask you something. And then they put their hand, and they're like these deep thinkers and they're communicating, but they're total bullshitters, right? And this is the problem. And many people see through them and they're saying, let me appeal to your senses. Do you value your world? Do you value your family? Do you value the interactions? Do you value Christmas? Even though, it's not perfect and blah, blah, blah. Do you value birthdays? Do you value 4th of July, which was yesterday, Independence Day? Do you value the fact that you get to eat a turkey sandwich? Well, you know that that's sacrifice and that there's a certain amount of sacrifice that has to be made. And even though we don't feel good about it, this is how the world continues on. And what if I was to tell you that this entropy that's brought about to these holy rollers who think that they are on this whole other level of purity, and really they're just pietists, are the ones causing the entropy. And that none of this entropy would exist, but we've learned to live in harmony. Look at us, we've transcended. And it's like, no, you're sellouts. You're sellouts. You've been offered a place in the Masonic Hall of Fame to have your name called out. And this is what they do over and over again, is in these halls, they call your name out when you passed away, and you're forever considered a brother. You have taken, all those vows are very serious. My family lineage never took those vows. And I was interviewed, and there was an attempt to bring me into it. And there's something where it's like, I think so antithetical to you that I don't even know. I was high off my ass. This Mason was trying to recruit me, this high-level Mason, who ended up going to Turkey, ended up leaving a car to my mother that she ended up driving my son around in, and I had no idea what the fuck was going on. I'm like, these people think they're going through this fucking ritualized process, but the truth is they're remembering and recording things that are a presupposition in their computational subset that doesn't even exist. That Conrad Zuse, Alan Turing, Jacobo Greenberg, and many others, even Philip K. Dick, like what he was being threatened with was part delusional. So in other words, he was being shown, look, man, you like this world? You like your son? The fact that he was killed meant that he didn't really understand it or he refused it. And then Meeks France, that whole thing that he got into, right, where he's talking about the man in the high tower and this whole otherworldly thing. What he's being shown is a manipulation of the mind, but it's quite real to the observer, where it was like, look, do you value the character and the life where you're, it was really interesting because his ties to Berkeley, right? And this particular Mason that I'm talking about, that went through this recruitment process, went off to Turkey, he was a graduate of Berkeley, right? So you're told who you're going to be the handler for. You're told who you'll be handled by. You're told directly in your mind. They come to you and it just happens, right? You're going to put on this suit today. You're going to do this. And the voice of God and all these CIA instruments of evil, all these different applications where they have manipulated people and people have died and da-da-da-da, and this whole Brazilian Roswell thing and why they do certain things. Much of this occurs in a semi-transient hypnagogic state. It doesn't mean it's not real. It's very real to the observer. Other people can even witness what's going on, and they prioritize you and they say you're going to go through the process, and you will have made a choice whether you think you made the choice or not. Because in this moment in time, right, and even though in your heart you're like, I don't know which direction to go in, none of this makes sense, right? Is that you think that you are parallel in a certain time sequence, but you're not. See, we're trapped in this prison that's held, time is actually held outside of time. In other words, the purity and the perfection don't cross-correlate. Pi and the concept of pi doesn't even exist. The idea of perfection is an undulating field of flux that is a moment, right? That it can't be identified in a particular place. It's just like trying to take a picture of the sun, right? The purity of the sun, the radiation of the sun, and to say, oh, that's the moment in time. And it's like, that's the moment in time in one certain aspect of the reflective field or the light spectrum. But then when you look at the emission of the solar flares, you're coming up with a completely different rendition. It's kind of like looking at the photography, like the Correlian photography and different photography that was proved or disproved, who cares, but supposedly taking pictures of the aura, right? Which was really disproved. But for you to get stuck on that, well, the dicyanine glasses, right? Those were kept. It's like you saying, and why is that illegal, right? And then you look at methylene blue. All that is a fabric dye. All the dicyanine that's made illegal is this dye. Why would it dye? And then you look at Indian ink, and you look at the fact that this isn't even technology, or is it? It's exhibiting an aspect of reality that otherwise isn't seen. But once you do see it, right, that becomes reality. So they want to alter your state of mind in order to live more in this red spectrum, right? When you're talking about the infrared or near infrared, to where you see things, you experience things that others don't, and then you've come into the light of pure reason. That's what the sacrifice is. You're sacrificing other people, you're going into the red spectrum, and that's what this satanic, Catholic, the connection with all of it, the ninth circle, they sacrifice people. And once you start that chain, then you mute people's expression. That's the blue, and that's the ultraviolet. And you're saying, I sacrifice myself, and therefore now I get to express myself. Why do you think the first thing that is introduced to you is muting? They will turn you into a straw man. They will mute your voice. They will they will drag you through the mud, make you look like you're nuts. Everyone will hate you. You won't know why. Even though these terrible things were done to you and you were basically raped by spiritual forces, right? You were being tortured for years by spiritual forces. Nobody knew what was going on with you. And then you start to talk to people, especially people who are electrically sensitive, right? Which really is everyone, but the only thing that can desensitize you is if you don't have a soul, right? So the first thing is this collective, it is Gnostic. Both sides, Gnosticism can be seen on both sides. And this links directly back to ancient Samaria, right? Because you have this idea of we can get to the same place. You're coming from the right, I'm coming from the left. You like to sacrifice yourself. You like to go into this sort of Socratean, Platonic reverence of seeing the self. And then you see what came out of that, the Aristotelian, right? Can't forget that. But what came out of that? Alexander the Great purging the world, killing people and being celebrated and thinking he was half God. The left-hand path he chose. Out of him being provided with and people even losing their heads over it. And this information finally came to Alexander the Great. And all he was like Marcus Aurelius. He was just another fucking dim-witted dipshit. Right? And supposedly he didn't make it to 33. So you look at Hiram Abiff and it's like, no, you didn't make it to 33 because what he probably didn't do is a last campaign where he had to see the atrocities of who he really was and how short-sighted he was and how he didn't overcome the world, how he created all these problems that later we would be stuck with today. That he caused so much problems, so much disharmony, that today everything's fucked up because people like Donald Trump existed then. These fat bozos with all this hubris who think they're part God and they're not part God. They are actually just the opposite. They're part demon. They're linked up. So the reason they think that they're part God is because they come from a lineage, like I was saying, where there's a certain gnosis and knowledge that's passed down, right? Where you could say the familiar line is a spiritual line. It really gets back into Rudolf Steiner, right? Where you have this Ahrimanic energy, you have this Luciferian energy. He was doing everything but pointing it right at the chicks, right? I mean, he understood he understood it. He understood what was really going on. So did Nietzsche. Yeah, they saw it. It's in the underlying underpinnings of their work. And it's to see that the great work, the real true great work, the greatest work, right, is to realize that the purity has always been with you, that you are a part of the purity, and everything that's being done in this world, if you're taking any steps to overthrow this, overthrow that, right? Look at what Alexander ultimately did. He set up the power for the Vatican and the Knights of Malta to be established and destroy the entire planet today. And Marcus Aurelius, in his meditations, was nothing but a sellout. I've had this talk with my son. He thinks I don't know anything, and that's the way it is. Like, a physician is not going to be respected in their own family and their own town. So in other words, somebody who's a metaphysician, which is seen as crazy, but that's what, like, the whole idea about Zoroastrianism is you're looking at astronomy and astrology as one, the cosmos as one, the ether as an actual existent substance, the plasma, right? The plasma state. And the fact that the illusion is matter itself. So you get into the aspects of there is no delineation. So a metaphysician is about the energetics, and the physician is understanding the ontological aspects and learning to work with that, with whatever is available to you at the time. And this does get into color coding. For you to refute that is to say, vegetables and fruits that are orange and yellow don't have a lot of vitamin A. Why do you think they're yellow and orange? For the most part, right? Or, something that's a red meat doesn't have more hemoglobin, right? Or doesn't assist in certain areas. It's like everything is based on colors, and our eyes are able to pick up on that, right? But on a certain we're only picking up on like 5 or 7 or 8% of the color spectrum, and some say much less than that, right? When you get into the totality of it, because that's under the presupposition that we understand the totality on a dimensional scale, that we only exist on one of those octave tones and are probably only in the process of a little undulation field of that. So, I mean, ideas, concepts, ontological concepts like the Mandelbrot set and the thoughts, the perspicacious thought process, right? The very doxastic, penetrating epistemology of seeing how things work, space, time, and events. Every time we try to assert this is the anthropology, this is the human quality, there is no human. There is no human quality. When you look at qualia, it's our experience, right? When you look at Welt, Welt-Built, Weltanschauung, Krieg, when you see the perspective and the parallax view of the idea, the representation, the world, you're always doing it from a self-preservation or not deviating too far from that, but going, how would this caterpillar see the world, right? From a parallax view. Or how am I going to build the world around that? Well, it's not going to be an egalitarian, democratic notion. To you it is, because you have all this hubris, and that's how Alexander the Great and the failed father and failed husband, right? Young Faustina and Commodus, the son, the failed son of Marcus Aurelius, represent who he really was. Because it's no lie, but it is a lie. It's the biggest lie. To look at the Master Key System by Charles F. Haanel, a high-level degree Mason that The Secret was based on, and to say that if you are not a father, a mother, a sister, a brother, right, if you don't have an identity in this world, then you are a theoretical abstract ego. And you will not be taken seriously. Not only won't you be invited in with the flock, with the Masonic order, with the Eastern Stars. See, the Eastern Stars, if they show prowess and ability and they're not just terrible people that sacrifice other people and are just playing around with it and they just want to have what they want now here. That's the way most people think. But when they really get into the witchcraft aspect of it, they'll be invited into a whole nother area that we don't even want to talk about here. But it's what fucking runs the show. It's why there's this, the Jewish rabbi has that wife who tells him what to do, tells everybody what to do, takes all the magic, takes all the money, while the rabbi is off showing off and flexing his little intellectual muscle, right? That things like Spaceball and Mel Brooks make fun of, Seinfeld makes fun of it. They want you to laugh about it while they're taking all the money and they're just making fun of themselves and coming up with little ditties. What do you think ditty means? Why do you think those rap songs sound like Jewish limericks? So if you get into the fact where you recognize that the Jews run the show, and then you get into the Khazarian mob, the Khazarian mafia, because you have to let off 95, 99% of the people who just don't know what the fuck they're doing, but they do. Because they're what I call, and have called for years, force bots. They can be activated at any time. That's why they're dangerous. Because they go and show reverence, and they make those little latkes, and they do all this bullshit to where they can be activated, and you'll see the green in them. It's a falsified community, a falsified green hue. And they're the ones who should be sacrificed. But everything's inverted, an inverted world. It's flip-flopped, upside down. We live in the inverted world. That's what this is. In other words, the real world is the world of plasma, is the world of a super state of being and becoming, is purification. The false world that's being purported out here, that is referencing absolute zero and the pure, it is killing off children, all that is pure, and for perfection, for the state of science, for the state of matriculation. And how many people have to come out of Stanford University to show you that that place is a CIA arm in an operation? Right? How many people, from Alan Turing to even Linus Pauling, being sabotaged and not even realizing what was happening when the pharmaceutical industry was rearing its head and buying everybody off, and his ideology, his idea, his concept wasn't even brought into fruition. But you have these champions And there are secret operatives, but in the orthomolecular.org field, right, that they are superheroes and they are champions because they're telling you how to fix yourself, and they're going against the way the world, even though it's killed off everyone, even though my uncle died and shouldn't have died of a heart attack because he was jumping on the bandwagon for COVID vaccinations and he was totally vaxxed. And he had to be because he wouldn't have gotten his benefits otherwise. And the veterans, especially around here, are treated like utter shit, going up to Palo Alto and all that. Utter shit, treated like worse than slime, right? Like, veterans aren't celebrated everywhere. They think that these small town minded people who had nothing better to do than to become the property of the federal property, when they didn't even need to, but they didn't know what the fuck they wanted to do. They came from abusive homes or just misdirected, and they signed up for the military when the recruiters were in town. I mean, that's how it's regarded. And they were so stupid, they spent their 4 years, and they're losers. And if they got thrown on the front lines, it's because they weren't worth salt and they didn't show themselves. It's like, how much more of a eugenics recruitment process can you get? Right? And you had a lot of people there who were spiritual sons that were passed away. These are all Stalingrad, Russia, and Germany throwing people out in the midwinter and just killing them and sacrificing them for no reason. There was a reason. There was a big reason, and it's happening today. It's happening today. It's happening all the time. The abortion clinics are involved in it. These are wings of operation. If you don't want to see it and you want to bury your head, people have been talking about it forever. And the pharmaceutical industry was allowed to go ahead while the supplement industry was hushed. Everything's inverted. Everything's antithetical, right? See it. See the parallax aspect. That if you just want to posture yourself and say, no, I'm not going to look at this atrocity. And then they say, hey, take a couple steps over to the left. Look, you can't even see it. It looks like fireworks, right? See how now you can see the bar, the coffee bar? You take a couple more steps over here. Check it out. Look at that. Now you just see these flashy lights. You don't see the people getting the shit blown out of them and people getting raped and the mass torture. You're not going over there to the right where now you're looking at yourself and you're seeing yourself, right? The reflection of yourself in total corruption. And this is what the Masonic and Rosicrucian artwork and the tarot is all about. Is to show you that this reflection back on yourself of this right-handed path observation is the fact that you could use the form of Lucifer breaking off, right, and spinning throughout space, breaking off and fractionating through one singular ray. And he didn't do anything wrong. There was nothing wrong with him. Or was it a female? Breaking off from Anu, right, and you have Tiamat. Look deeper at it. I didn't mean to be a terrible, evil witch. I didn't mean to be a terrible, evil bitch. So look at Melania. Look at that ugly serpent-looking woman, and nobody's looking at that. Look at George Bush's weird wife, Barbara Bush, who looked like fucking Senator Palatine or whatever it was. Palpatine. And I got it confused with Palatine because that was the original ship that brought the Germanic people here. Guarantee in the bloodline there's Nords. And I guarantee there were Nords or angels that stood on high and said, I am not going to sell out. I'm here to establish, like Plymouth Rock and all that, I'm here to establish on this land and all land the purity and the purification. And a lot of people, so then they're over here doing this thelemic sex magic, producing all these error codes. It's written about in the Gospel of Truth with the jars. Put this shit all together. You can stay in moral conjecture over things, but the morality, the master morality and the slave morality, they break off in deviant points of light. And the Luciferian Statue of Liberty, I mean, you got to know that the Statue of Liberty is fashioned from high-level masons, that the dollar bill and the pyramids on the top of the dollar bill are fashioned by masons. You understand what the green means, the funerary green, the green pyre, right? You understand that, right? Once you get into the intricate aspects of this, you'll see the importance of the vegetation and the vegetables, right? And it seems like it's going off topic, but then you see the Scottish Rite, and you see how one out of something like, the worst I heard was 1 out of 32 babies survived the potato famine. So, I mean, literally people were scrounging and trying to survive off the bare minimum. And throughout times, throughout ages, there's a memory that sinks in this psychosomatic death tone that is recorded within us, because those who survived remember quite well. When you're marked with that type of information and you are part of a successful lineage, do you think that really exists? Of those who chopped up their own kids. Look at it. Look at Ukraine and look at Russia. Do you think that that's not parallel to now? It was 1929 and 1939. Do you know that 7 to 15 million people died through the famines, and that there was an exact 10-year gap? We talked about the other things that were going on there. We talked about Jean-Felix Picard and high weather altitude ballooning and how he said he could get, and then they try to dismiss it and go, oh, he was crazy, or he didn't really say that. Then you look at his lineage, and that's where the cockpit that ended up in space, that I believe von Braun was using, that's where the cockpit was actually developed. Did you know that? Yeah. Whether or not somebody took, like Trump, dump, whether or not you're smart enough to remember or you took the Masonic oath, you did so. And there are Masons that went through the process where everything they do every day is a Masonic. Like when you think that he's doing something that's representing hubris and temerity, right? He's actually representing the Masonic right. They spell right wrong on purpose. Their right is different. They see things different. And when you begin to amalgamate yourself with them, and you start to see the heathens and the goy, they're all Jews at the end of the day. They're all Zionists. They are. And they may not be Jews directly, but they are Jews by affiliation, and that's their ideation with Israel. You know, this whole Hamas, Palestine, Israel, Turkey, Egypt connection. This is huge. Some say Turkey is the entrance into actual hell. But hell for us, as they state in the UAP community, that's where like David Icke gets into this, and even more so Ted Rice, right? Where you begin to look at these lizard people who are kind of like in the underground caverns, making sure that nobody enters into the Nordic communities. You think that we can't make monkey people? What do you think Stalin was doing? Right? You think that we can't produce lizard people? We start out that way. How fucking hard do you think that is? So when you're talking about these being aliens from another planet, they might as well be. They exist in another place. Could they be produced from our DNA, from our genetics now? Yes, they could. All the information is there. So it's a question of technology. Techne, the technology and the art. Put it together. It's very critical. It's a very serious discussion. It seems like it's wide and broad, but it actually isn't, because it comes down to harnessing these principles and choosing whether or not you are a pure son. Even if you think of yourself as a daughter, that was all an illusion. Don't follow it. Whether you embrace purity or perfection, which is just a notion, it doesn't exist. Do you understand what perfection means? It's saying that you are solidified in a singular state of performance, shape, and form. That's impossible. Do you understand what purity is? Look at that bright light. Purity means you're in flux. You're always moving. You're part of the plasma state. Whatever you think, become, like David Hume's probity, it's always in flux. It's always moving, right? It's a beautiful thing because you don't have to be solidified in a particular form through geometrical confluence or influence or mandatory structure. Why do you think that all these halls are so dark? The halls of Amante, the green, the emerald tablets, the green. This is some evil shit, and this is where the Jewish origin really takes place and manifests from a very ancient, archaic place that really is a lot like Wizard of Oz. It's getting real with yourself. It's getting real with who Judy Garland really was. It's getting real with the midgets and the criminals and the criminal element that they represented. They were drug addicts, alcoholics, philanderers, rapists, ostracized, excommunicato from society, made into that, laughed at, made fun of, right? Produced, cast aside, you know? And now today, everybody carries their little torch campaigning for all these democratic, woke, right, concepts of we're going to be this form. And in truth, you're not a form. You never will be a form. And you need to be informed as to the fact that when you get into this transient state of being and becoming, it is not impure. It is all what people leave out. And what wokeism is about is that, oh, you're saying that I can't be a this or a that? That I can't be me? And it's like, there is no you. It's a flux. When you understand purity, you'll realize that you're being selfish and you're being self-ingratiating, right? So they're not concepts you can even understand here because we live in this uniform structure that is a lie. It is a projection. It is Hollywood. It gets into Jordan Maxwell, the Hollywood, right? That's why on the front of EPL, when I copied the first 5 years of EPL, and those are terrible books, but I wanted to make sure that some of EPL lived on. And so all I did was copy pasted a lot of those posts. And I didn't even go through whether or not I misspelled or whatever. I put them in. Because if the website or the blog disappears, I wanted to put down at least what I was thinking, what it represented, what I was trying to do with the limited amount of knowledge that I had. And we're not going to be given a lot of knowledge now. It's not something that's afforded to us. All right, so we're going to keep walking. This is going to die pretty soon anyway, the battery, so be well.